G'day and welcome to Beyond Sobriety, a podcast where you'll hear real stories of recovery and resilience come to life. I'm Michael and I'm an alcoholic, your host and fellow journeyer on the road to sobriety. As someone who has walked the path of addiction and found solace in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I understand the challenges and triumphs that come with striving for sobriety. And it's with this understanding and empathy that we've created this podcast. Our purpose here at Beyond Sobriety is simple yet profound: to provide a platform where individuals can share their experience with alcoholism openly and authentically. Through candid conversation, personal narrative, and expert insights, we aim to inspire hope, foster understanding, and offer a beacon of light to those still navigating the shadows of addiction. We'd love for you to be a part of this growing community. If you find value in the stories that you hear today, please consider liking and leaving a comment and sharing this episode with somebody who might benefit from hearing it. Your support will help spread the message of hope and resilience to more people who need it. I'm Michael and I'm an alcoholic, and this is Beyond Sobriety. So we'll begin. We're here with Shae. Shae, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Shae. I'm 39 and I've been sober for just over 5.5 years.
5.5 years is an incredible achievement, firstly. Congratulations. 5 years is fantastic. Can you describe what it was like or the circumstances around your first drink?
My first drink was at the age of 12. I went to stay at a friend's house and her older brother was 16 and they were having a party, and my friends and I went to this party and there was drinking there, and that's where I had like my first proper actual intentional drink.
Yeah.
I don't remember feeling drunk or anything specifically spectacular about that night or that experience, but just more that I felt like I was free, being with my friends. I was just being cool.
How much did you have to drink?
On that night, I remember sort of having 3 beers, but probably bits and pieces of other stuff as well.
For a 12-year-old, that'd be quite significant.
Yeah, it would be. Look, I don't remember much about it, not because I was drunk or blacked out or anything, but I just know that was my first drink and I remember the circumstances. But other than that, there was nothing to highlight about it except that, there were older boys there and stuff,
Feeling a bit like an adult.
Yeah.
So after that first time when you were 12, you had a couple of drinks at a friend's party, basically. I've interviewed a lot of people and they've said, from the second I had a drink, I was hooked. I was, I was gone. That wasn't my experience. Would you be able to identify with that, or how was that with you?
Look, I think I don't remember like my next drink specifically or anything after that, but by about the age of 14, I was drinking regularly on weekends and drinking to excess, like there would be drinking to the point of vomiting, drinking copious amounts of alcohol, passing out, stuff like that. And it would always be the similar situation where it would be like, we'll go to a friend's house. They either had an older boyfriend or an older brother or sister would get us alcohol.
I think everybody has that one friend, doesn't it? The one friend that just has access to all the drugs and the smokes and the drinking.
The ciggies and the alcohol. But it's funny you say smokes because I had friends that lived up the road from me and we were always just, the tobacconist down the road would sell us ciggies at the age of 12.
Oh, yeah.
It was back in those days.
Yeah, down at the corner deli.
Yeah.
Look, it was probably like 80% of the guys trade.
Yeah, 100% of it, I reckon. Yeah, and it'd just be that under the table. Ciggies were only a couple of bucks and you could get a packet of holiday 20s for like $3 bloody 20 or something, you know what I mean? So I was just for me, it was just that we're doing something that we shouldn't be. Now that I'm in AA and I do look back at my story, I can see that alcohol, it was very prominent in my teens, and the way I drink now that I'm in AA, I can look back and see that it was problematic from early age, and I mean young teens. I didn't drink to enjoy myself. I drank to get drunk from that young age, and I can see that. And any opportunity I got to drink, I took it.
So looking back now, you can say you were drinking differently to your peers.
Yes. My peers would drink too. And look, a couple of us had that similar experience of drinking to the point of vomiting, and, probably lots of young people vomit when they drink, and lots of people, even if they only have a few, then I had friends who didn't drink like that.
Yes.
And that was a thread I think that was common for me. We all got drunk, But for me, it was always just too much, like too much for me to even handle the next day. I was like, what the hell was that all the time?
So did you experience blackouts in those times?
Yeah. God, yeah, from a young age. Like I would experience blackouts. I remember blackouts starting for me at 17, probably before.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would drink to blackout.
Yeah.
And wake up and not know how I got to bed or, at times like where I was.
So did that affect your schooling, or was that just purely on the weekends when there was a party and an opportunity?
It was purely on the weekends and, when there was an opportunity. Yeah. Look, my parents would not let me drink until I was 18 and, and that was the right thing to do, Probably, there might have been the odd occasion where at 16 or 17, if there was like a, school formal or something and they might have let me have a couple of drinks, but they certainly did not condone smoking or drinking before the age of 18.
Yes.
But I did, both of them.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's anybody I've spoken to that hasn't drunk before that time. I remember when you were talking about your first drink, I remember when I was a kid, and I'm talking quite young, probably about 14, I would have my friends over for a sleepover and we'd have a tent in the backyard. And we'll be sneaking into the house and having, I'd have like half a bit of wine and half a bit of water and, and drink and pretend I was drunk because I was like, oh, this is cool. This is what people do. It's what grown-ups do.
Yes.
And that was, my first experience. But no, it was very rare that we even had alcohol in the house when I was a child, which is funny because I look now at some of my brothers and sisters and I know I have a drinking problem. And I know that one of my sisters has been fired from a job because of her drinking. And I know another one had to really stop because she was having a lot of issues as well, and my brother. There's only probably one of my siblings that I could sit there and say it looks like they didn't seem to have a problem or they escaped that. And I guess it's interesting how that runs in families. So
it is, yeah.
We're up to the part of your story where you're, I guess, late teens. How did you go transitioning from, I guess, childhood school to the workforce?
So drinking continued to be a part of my life well into my late teens and early adulthood. I remember the first time I tried to stop drinking because I knew it was a problem for me. I was 19 years old.
That early?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I remember when I was 19, I stopped for 3 months because I already felt the way I did when I was 33 when I stopped, the 5.5 years ago.
Yes.
So all of that was already there for me, the lack of control over how much I could drink and the guilt, shame and remorse was already there when I would wake up after drinking because of my lack of control. In that time, I developed a bit of a pot habit as well. So I was, using drugs and drinking and it just wasn't a good combination for me. I did stop smoking pot regularly at around the age of 20, 21. Look, I finished my HSC and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be a chef. So for many years I thought I was going to be a chef, but I didn't have the drive for university. I didn't actually end up I pursued, careers in kitchens and things like that. But I found that my heart was I was more interested in community services. So I actually went to start to study that at TAFE.
Yeah.
I couldn't finish those studies because I was too hooked on pot and too much drinking. So I didn't have the capacity in my brain to cope with study.
Yeah.
And I actually ended up getting a job. So I went into full-time work after that. I was actually sacked from said job because of drinking on the job. And that's just the highlights reel of the negative things that happen. There were also good things happening in my life.
That's like your early 20s, yeah?
It's my late teens, early 20s. So that's around the age of 19.
Okay.
So early 20s, I scored, what was really a dream job for me. And that's when I was able to let smoking weed go.
Okay.
But alcohol ramped up.
Yep.
I would drink after work quite regularly. The boss I worked with was also alcoholic. So we worked within walking distance to the local pub. And there were weeks there where every afternoon we'd go and drink after work.
Yep.
And I would get in my car and drive home or drive or wherever. So drinking actually became more prominent in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And just became a part of daily life pretty much.
I think that's a fairly common experience. I know I experimented with a bit of marijuana when I was a kid. I think most people did. But I will say most people because, my wife and I recently went on a holiday to Florida and over there marijuana is legal.
Right.
And it is sold everywhere. There's smoke shops everywhere. I'm walking past shops and people and I can smell marijuana, and I turn over to my wife and like, oh, I said, do you recognize that smell? She goes, oh, it's a bit funny. What is it? I'm like, that's marijuana. She goes, I've never smelt that before.
Wow, yeah. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
People out there don't do what I've just described. And
Yes.
that's what I find, like for me and my group of friends, it was common to try things, to drink, to, you know, use drugs recreationally or, you know, smoke weed on the regular.
Yeah.
But for a lot of groups of people and friends and people that I knew, it was not even on their radar. Like it just wasn't for them.
Yeah.
I knew people who didn't drink by choice because they didn't like it. I still know people like that. Like
look, they're weird.
It's unusual to me, and you're not going to hang out with those people because you're not that kind of person.
No, exactly.
So
it's like, oh, I don't like this. It makes me feel funny. I'm like, that's why I love it.
That's what we're doing here. Yeah.
That's why I love it. It's an interesting concept, you know, because I remember there was a share a while ago at the group, and the person said, oh, I thought I'd walk into AA and expect to see XYZ. Now, I thought I'd walk into AA and have people like who were there who hated alcohol, but really it's the exact opposite. The reason we're there is because we love it.
Yeah.
We absolutely love it. We hate what it does to us. We hate the effect of, when I say the effect, I'm not talking about the feeling, it's the effect it has on our lives. But you won't find a bunch of people that love alcohol more than a whole bunch of alcoholics that haven't drunk in a while. Like,
yeah.
it's a bit of a paradoxical statement.
Yeah.
Did you ever get to the stage where you're hiding your drinking?
Yes.
How would you do that?
Look, for me, I think hiding my drinking would be because of my own shame about the way that I drank, you know, especially when I was drinking, perhaps when I was living with my mum and dad and I was coming home either drunk or stoned. Of course, I would try and hide that because I felt that was wrong. And, you know, especially if I was drinking after work and driving, they would not approve of that because I did a lot of drink driving. So I didn't want anyone to know I was drinking and driving.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
hey, look, you know, I did a hell of a lot of drink driving. Every day for about 2 years before I got sober, every day I would drink drive.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because some people are like, like so shocked. It was just like, yeah, no biggie. Like, that's just what we do.
It's my normal state of mind. Like
It's because we're better than everyone else when we're drunk.
Yeah.
That's how I used to feel. I'm better than you drunk than you are sober.
I feel like it's an entitlement thing. Like I feel like who cares if I've had a few drinks? I'm driving. Like I did not give a shit about anyone else except what I needed and wanted at that time. And I would know when I would approach the drinking that I would have to drive, but I still wouldn't be able to limit the amount of drinking.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, towards the end of my drinking, I wouldn't necessarily hide alcohol around the house or anything like that because I just didn't need to. But I would do things like say I'd had less than I had, drink before I got home so that I was, you know, pre-drunk before any drinking. They were the main ways that I hid my drinking. You know, I would often sneak alcohol to places. Can't remember ever doing it specifically at work. I definitely hid my drinking in many ways than hiding alcohol itself.
Yeah.
I pretended I was someone I wasn't for a very long time.
No, for sure. I mean, I used to do that every day. I'd get vodka when I could afford it and I'd put it in water bottles. And I'll just have water bottles around.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a funny trick I learned how to figure out which one the vodka is and which one the water bottle is. If you shake a bottle of water, nothing really happens. But if you shake a thing of vodka, it aerates really well.
So you'd get bubbles and
you
whatnot.
get a lot, like a mist.
Okay.
Almost, like a misty thing. And then you're like, that's the one that I'm after.
Yeah, like not, I don't want to accidentally have some water.
Oh,
That'd
God.
be horrible. Lucky the kids didn't know the shake trick. Like, seriously.
But you know what? There were times that there was more than once where I had, you know, it was a different kind of alcohol, but it was in a bottle that was left out. You know, my wife would be like, one of the kids has drunk this. You had it in a different bottle. What the hell? I was like, oh, crap. You know, so some of my kids have drunk what they thought was Gatorade and it wasn't. It was, you know, like fortified wine or something and be like, oh, yuck, that tastes disgusting. What's Dad been drinking? And then, you know, my wife will come and give it a bit of a smell and I'll be like, oh, crap, I'm in the doghouse now.
Yeah, like Like, did she question why did you have alcohol in that funny bottle?
No, because
that what you
alcohol
mean?
was generally a no-no in our house, full stop.
Okay.
So I would have to hide it regardless. If I was
Yeah.
drinking, it was closet drinking. You know, it was in the garage. Oh, I've got to go get this tool. Or a lot of the time I'll try not to bring it into the house. So I would get drunk at the local shops here in the public toilet.
Yeah.
I would go into the disabled toilet. I would get my 2 bottles and I would scull them both, put them in the bin. And then I would go home, cook dinner and, you know, slowly feel the effects set in and be like, all right, I'm set for 80% of the night. And then I'll have to go to the garage once or twice just to top up.
Definitely. Like, that gives me anxiety. The fact that you're going home drunk, but then you don't have anything to top up with, that would be like really
I'd always have
devastating.
something. I'd always have something. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, the lengths. Did you,
Oh, God,
what kind of lengths did you go to actually get a drink?
Oh, look, some of those things I wouldn't share openly in a public forum, but lying, any form of lying, you know, going to a friend's house. And I'm talking as a married adult with children. Yeah, I'm going to a friend's house. And the funny thing is I'm walking the dogs. That was a good one. I'd take a beer and a couple of ciggies, walking the dogs. See, I didn't have to hide my drinking as such, but what I felt I needed to hide was the amount I was drinking. Like I said, like for me, most of my hiding was through lying. So I would drink before I got home a certain amount, or I'd go, I'm staying late at work when really I'm finishing at X time and going to have after work drinks.
Yeah, I get you.
That type of thing.
You'd create space where you could go get it.
Yeah.
Easy.
That dishonesty living in my body. And, you know, I might come home with a 6-pack, but I'd have my tail between my legs because I knew that he probably didn't appreciate my drinking, my husband at the time. I knew I was already fucking 4 parts drunk. I'd want to avoid argument. So I would drink before I got home. I would make excuses. But yeah, I used to do the whole, I've got to go to the shop, go and sit in the car and smoke and drink. Yeah, just stupid things. Like, and smoking is something I used to hide as well because I gave up, and then I used to hide that I was smoking heaps as well. So it's not the person I wanted to be.
No.
You know, it's not who I intended to be, and it doesn't do much for relationships when the person knows you're lying, you know you're lying, and yeah, that's how it does damage.
So we'll get back to your story a bit. Last time we were there, you were drinking with your boss. Was that the job that you said you got fired from for drinking?
No, that was before that one.
That was before that one. So we're past that point. How did your drinking progress? Because obviously it's starting to affect your professional life, and you've also just shared about it affecting your personal life as well. So continue on that journey.
I think how did it progress was just that, like, I was still behaving like a teenager or someone who was single in their young early 20s, you know, even as an adult married with children.
Yep.
And the behaviour, the binge drinking, the regular drinking, and there's a lot of years in between that, but I just continued to party like I was still able to party. And realistically, I should have been prioritising and being a grown-up. So I would still like to go out till all hours of the morning. I would still, you know, attend a lot of social functions where there was drinking. And just jumping back, but before I was married, sort of in my 20s, mid-20s, I would do weekend benders. So I'd stay drunk all weekend. It might start Thursday night, Friday, sleep a little bit in between, but I'd get up, I'd drink. It would just be any moment that I had that was social was drinking.
Yeah.
So, you know, I might go to work in between, but I'm still drunk from the night before. And then as soon as I get home, I'm drinking again just to maintain the drunkenness.
Yeah.
You know, I lived with friends in that time. We partied hard. You know, it was a party house. Once I think I was about 25, 26 when I met my to-be husband. So up until then, that's what it was like. It was all just party, 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 work, party, work, party. You know, I worked in pubs. I used to, forgot to mention that I worked in pubs, and some of the lengths I would go to drink would be that friends of mine or the boyfriend that I had at the time would drink at that pub, and I would give them a drink for me, so that when I ran around and cleaned ashtrays and picked up glasses, I was getting drunk at the same time.
Okay.
So yeah, like I have gone to a lot of lengths to get drunk. Working in a pub was very convenient for an alcoholic.
Oh, absolutely.
You know.
It's like Augustus Glump at the chocolate factory.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and to me, it was all okay. It was all justifiable.
Yeah.
See, I can sit here and look at this now and say that behaviour is problematic. There's something wrong with that behaviour. But at the time,
it's not normal.
Everything's justifiable.
Yeah. Like I'm listening to your story from an alcoholic's lens and going, that seems completely normal to me.
Yeah.
But if someone's listening to this who isn't, they could just see, and that's what we talk about, the madness of it. The unacceptable
insanity.
becoming acceptable, the insanity. And you're just there going, why the hell wouldn't I do this? Like, it's completely...
It's genius.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Like, I work in a pub. Why wouldn't I be getting hammered?
Why the hell
time?
not? Like, if, you know, and you're there in your crazy head going, no one else can see it, but everybody else can.
My mum would say to me when I made amends with her, a lot of it is just part of growing up. And don't get me wrong, a lot of that is in terms of going out with your friends
Pushing
and having a good
boundaries,
time, pushing boundaries, you know, but mine was just always that bit too far, whether it was alcohol, drugs. I just always pushed it that bit too far, that it was not normal and illegal in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah.
You know,
the amount of rules we break to get drunk is astronomical. So, you know, the law getting in our way or going, well, you can't drink at work, you can't drink and drive, you can't do this or whatever it might be, it means nothing. It's not even a blip. Like,
it's all justifiable to me. If I think it's okay, then I'm going to make it okay to do.
Do you think you're trying to escape anything with your drinking?
Look, I don't often identify with that. Now, as a sober person, when I go into fear or uncertainty or something uncomfortable, I can see how it was my go-to, or resentment, you know, and I'm using all recovery-based words, but basically when I'm uncomfortable, I can see. But at the time, it was just what I did. And to me, having a drink was a very normal thing, but what wasn't normal was how much I would drink and the lengths I would go to drink.
Yeah.
The day-on-day benders, that's not just going out with your friends for a good night. That's like trying to be drunk for days on end and using whatever it takes to be there. And
because I guess I would drink to escape my reality. Because even though looking back, I was going, look, I've always had a fairly good life. However, I wasn't content with that life. I would pick up all the little things that I wasn't happy with and that would really get me down and depressed. And so I'll be like, oh, I've got a really crap life. I'm not happy with myself. And I'll drink. Or if I got an argument with my wife, I'll punish her by secretly getting drunk. I'll show you I'll get drunk and I don't have to worry about you anymore. Or, oh, she's yelling at me again. Okay, I'll just get drunk.
Yeah.
And I'll just ride this out. I didn't care. And it's funny because some people get quite aggressive when they're drunk. I was never aggressive. I was never angry. It was a way of escaping and withdrawing into myself. So, and like, I guess that's why I asked the question.
I think, and you know, with what you're saying, I think now that I'm sober and in recovery, I can see, and this is why I think it's important to dig into the recovery stuff, because if I'm just sober, and I have been just sober, like I've gotten sober a number of times before I came to AA and for good amounts of time, I can't understand what's going on within me and what actually drives me to drink. Because like you just said, for me, everything on the outside were things that, you know, should have made me happy. Husband, kids, house, good job, beautiful family. You know, I had a great upbringing, not without its bumps and problems and things like that.
Absolutely.
You know, I have a brother who's in addiction as well and has been since we were young and still is. But again, everyone has something in their family. But for me, I think now that I look at it, I can see that it's more what I believe about myself and my life and my perception that makes me unhappy. So it's exactly like you said. Like if I'm discontent, it's not being able to be in the now. It's not being happy with what is right now. It's the stuff that I want to be different that can't be. That's what makes me uncomfortable. You know, not being able to appreciate the simple things, thinking I should be someone that I'm not able to be. All the shoulds is what makes me drink. I'm not good enough. I should be more this. I should be less that. I should be. And it's living in that space where you're not good enough ever. That's what I think contributed to it for me, but I could only see that once I got sober.
Absolutely.
I definitely could not see that when I was drinking.
No, you never can.
It's impossible.
And even then, it's after a bit of time after getting sober.
Yeah.
The way I like to describe it is I might not be drinking, but I'm definitely not sober. You know, I'm not, you know, there's a difference between being sober and recovery.
Yeah, your thinking's not sober.
No, exactly. You're still messed up. And the more I go along and the more I do inventory, the more I do my step work, the more I realize, man, I've got a lot of issues.
And they keep coming, you know, life will deliver, you know, it really delivers. And for me, you know, if it's do some inventory, if it's keeping myself at meetings, if it's being honest when I don't want to be, if it's being vulnerable when I don't want to be, or drink, I'm going to take the first options. Yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah. So you said you met your husband. You obviously met a guy, fell in love, got married. How did your drinking drinking affect your relationship?
Oh, gosh. Look, I think you'd have to ask him that as well. But I remember this one time that we were early dating. And look, I got engaged when we were together 8 months. We got married when we were together 11 months. We never lived together before that. It was just meant to be at that time.
Yeah.
I remember this one night he stayed over my house while we were still dating. And I was drinking and blaring music. I don't even know if he was drinking this night. I can't remember. But I remember him coming out and asking me at whatever time of night to turn down the music, and I wouldn't. Like, I was just drunk, you know, it wasn't like an aggressive thing. Long story short, the next morning, probably early hours of the morning, I woke up on the kitchen floor and he was gone. And I messaged him and he's like, well, you wouldn't shut up. You wouldn't stop drinking. You know, you wouldn't turn down the music. I had to play soccer the next day or whatever it was. So I got up and I drove home to Wollongong at that time.
Okay.
And
so what, a good hour drive?
Yeah, a good hour drive.
Yep.
And, you know, I just thought to myself, once I got sober and like a little bit later on when drinking really did take over in the marriage, I thought to myself, you really should have known then that something was wrong.
A bit of a red flag.
Bit of the red flags, yeah.
It's all his fault then.
Oh, exactly. You know, couldn't he see? But, you know, he thought the best of me. And look, he's not an alcoholic. He hardly drinks. You know, he might have one beer on a social occasion like once a year. And it just was very foreign to him. He didn't have people who drank in his family. He didn't understand. Not that he didn't understand, but it wasn't something that was familiar to him. So I think, you know, jumping ahead later on in the marriage, my drinking after I had the kids. So we were married, had kids. And then once the kids hit an age, like even when I was on maternity leave, I was drinking at home. I would justify drinking between breastfeeds at that stage. My drinking just ramped back up and it became what it used to be when I was a 20-year-old.
Yeah.
I would start going out, even on a Monday night, you know, friends of mine who are now sober would come over and we'd sit up till 3 a.m. on a Tuesday morning and drink out the front cases of beer, just, you know, and my kids are inside, he's inside, and that would happen a couple of times a week.
Yeah.
I would be coming in at 11 o'clock going, I'm just going to go down the pub for a few beers. I would go out on the weekends and I wouldn't come home, you know, not because I didn't want to, but because I'd picked up the first drink and I couldn't control how much I was drinking or what happened after that. So that's how it affected my marriage. I made some really big mistakes and I did things that couldn't be taken back and I did things that damaged any relationship. Just to cut to the end of it, basically, like he had enough. And I think it was one sort of last time that I didn't come home and the kids are coming in saying, where's mummy? And he didn't know. He couldn't tell them. It's like, I don't know. Because, I'd go out and get drunk and, you know, drain the bank account and he'd had enough. He couldn't do it anymore. And I don't blame him. I wouldn't put up with me. Absolutely would not have put up with me.
Hi, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the show so far. This podcast is all about sharing real stories of resilience, recovery, and hope. Stories that remind us that we're not alone in this journey. If you'd like to support this work and help us reach more people, there are a few simple ways you can make a difference. Take a moment to like this episode, leave a comment, or share it with someone who you think might benefit from hearing it, whether it's a friend, family member, or somebody in your recovery community. Your support could touch the lives and inspire someone in their road to sobriety. Your stories are important. They remind us that we are not alone and help us all stay sober. What we're doing here creates a space where people can share their experiences, feel understood, and find inspiration to keep moving forward. By supporting the show, you're helping to amplify those voices and ensure that more people who need to find this message can. If you'd like to share your story and be interviewed, please email me at beyondsobrietyaa@gmail.com. Every journey is unique, and your experience could be exactly what someone needs to hear to find hope, strength, or inspiration. This podcast thrives on real stories from real people, and your voice has the power to make a difference in somebody's life. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to connect and discuss how your story can be a part of Beyond Sobriety. Thank you for your support. Together we can continue to make a difference. Now, let's get back to the episode. Was there ever an ultimatum? Was there a, you need to stop drinking? Or
there was never a you need to stop drinking. There definitely was a, I think you have an alcohol problem.
Yeah.
because I would try and ask him to help me throughout the years. I would say I would have rock bottoms in those times, and I would be like, I've got to stop drinking. I can't stop drinking.
Yeah.
I can't stop doing the same things. And, you know, what happens in that is that you make those promises that you're not going to drink again and that you're going to go to AA or you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And then when you don't do it, it starts to break down trust.
Oh, absolutely.
And that love you become someone that they can't trust because you're doing the same thing again that you promised not to do. And so it started to erode away at the relationship and the trust and the love.
How long were you married for?
Just under 7 years.
Under 7 years, so a decent amount of time. That's tough on anybody.
However, if I can just add this, I got sober about 6 months after we split up, and AA and sobriety has given me that relationship back. So we have children together. We don't hang out on the weekends together or have coffees together, but we talk almost every day about our kids. There's nothing that we can't discuss. You know, we're very amicable, and that is as a result of me being in AA.
Well, I guess that's the next best thing.
It is.
Because obviously the best thing for a family is for it to be together. But if you can't have that, you need to have two parents that co-parent well and that are on the same page, which is what it sounds like you have now.
You know, and I often share this as well in AA because I think it really contributes that how alcohol affected my relationship and my family and my relationship with my kids. I felt no joy when I spent time with my family. Like I could feel nothing lit me up like alcohol did.
Yeah.
Like a day out with the family was like, it just did not give me what it should have.
No, you're distracted.
I'm distracted.
Yeah.
I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. I wanted to be the wife and the mum, but because of alcohol and the thinking, even when I wasn't drinking, I could not be that person. So that affected the relationship as well, not just while I was drinking, but outside of that, because I had no enthusiasm for my life as a mum and a wife. I loved my husband and children, but I had no real commitment and I couldn't enjoy the simple things in life while I had alcohol in my life.
Yeah.
Because alcohol was the only thing really that made me feel joy.
Yeah, I can identify 100% with that. It's kind of like you're working at a job because you have to. You're going through the motions because you have to and it's expected.
Yes.
But it's not something you want to be. It's not where your passion is because it's at the bottom of the bottle. It's the next drink. And like I would fantasize about retiring with a drink.
Yeah.
Not with my family, not with my wife, not with it. I had this concept of an idea of going, I can go and I can do up a boat and I can go sailing and have a space where I can drink without feeling judged.
Isn't that funny? Hey, you've got all this beautiful stuff in front of you and it's that saying, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And I certainly didn't.
Yeah.
And it actually took me years to learn that. It took me years to learn how to do what I wish I would have been able to do, but I never would have learnt it without that happening.
Yeah. Oh, of course. It's a necessity almost.
It is.
And it's a hard truth of reality. And it's a different level for each of us. You need to get to that point before you went, I have to turn my life around. And then you go, I wish I could go back, but that door's closed.
Yeah.
So would you say that's a rock bottom?
Look, I had so many rock bottoms. There were definitely rock bottoms during my marriage, but I had an ultimate rock bottom, which was where I stopped drinking and I've been sober since until now. But I don't know how I would stay sober if I didn't get to know people in AA and have that connection.
Absolutely.
You know, rock bottoms started happening for me, as I said, at the ages of, teenager. Rock bottoms were there, but I didn't know how to get sober. I didn't know how to stay sober. I didn't know that I had this. And, people would justify my drinking along with me. Oh, you're just having a good time. You just love a drink. And, I believed that stuff.
Yeah.
There was something deep down for me that was like, no, something's not right.
Are you happy to share any of your rock bottoms?
I'm happy to share. I'll only draw on the one that happened 5.5 years ago.
Sure.
Basically, I went out drinking on a Thursday night and my husband had left by this stage, so I was on my own and I didn't have the kids certain days of the week and I was out drinking with a friend. We went to meet friends in Penrith. We got absolutely annihilated, as you do. I don't remember much of the night. I know I was driving, which was in a blackout. And basically, I woke up on the Friday morning by myself in a hospital bed in an emergency ward in a lot of pain. I could barely move. I'd had a really huge fall at this person's house, basically off a big wall, walked into their back garden and fell and basically had to get ambulance to Westmead Hospital and I had 20 staples in my head. I'd split my head open. I dislocated my shoulder and I've never felt pain in my back like it.
How far was the fall?
I don't even know, but I fell into concrete. So I had to ring my friend and say, what am I doing here?
Yep.
And she said to me, I thought this was going to be the police telling me that you were dead. So from there on in, I haven't picked up a drink, and it hasn't been easy at times, but it definitely made it easier.
Yeah.
I think what hit me on that day was I had already been considering rehab because I knew I couldn't stop drinking, and I was starting to need to drink to feel normal, whereas I used to believe it was my choice to drink. In the last sort of 6 to whatever months, I had started to really realise that it was against my will, like it wasn't my choice. I did not want to drink this way anymore.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to stop. Other times I'd been able to give up and, put in these efforts around giving up, and they'd work to a degree, and then I'd drink again. And, I thought to myself, and I think this was probably the critical moment, was my kid's mother is going to die if I don't do something about this. Like, my children are going to lose their mother to some alcohol-related accident.
And then that will be their story and frame their life.
Yeah. And that would be my legacy. Nothing good would come of, my mum died because she was drink driving, or my mum died because she's out being a hoon on the grog or something, So, it had to stop. And my mum had to come and look after me. Like, I literally needed a carer after that. And thank God no permanent damage was done. So that was my last drink. I hope it's my last drink forever.
Describe the first time in AA.
I went to AA before I stopped drinking. A psychologist I was seeing recommended that I went to AA because of the drinking that I would talk about with him.
Yeah.
Because I was at that point, as I said, where I started to realise I was drinking against my will, meaning that even when I didn't want to drink, I was drinking anyway.
Yeah.
Even when I would have that guilt, shame and remorse, I started to need it.
Yeah.
So he recommended I went to AA. I went a couple of times. I drank after it a couple of times. When I had the rock bottom, that was within that 6 months before the last rock bottom I just spoke about. And my first experience in AA sober was very emotional, very scary, very reassuring. I just couldn't believe that there were people out there who drank like me and that were sober. I never knew anyone else that was sober, as in I had no friends that were sober. And I don't mean people who just don't drink. I mean people with a drinking problem who overcome it. And it was a lifeline to me. I'd lost my marriage. I had to sell my house. I'd had a huge accident where I'd hurt myself really badly. I didn't have my kids full time anymore. Like, my life was not looking good.
Yeah.
Everything around me started to crash down around me. So AA was a real lifeline. It was hope that I could get sober and stay sober. Yeah. That actually people can not drink when they have a drinking problem.
Yeah, that was foreign to me too. Like, I remember when I first came in, you'd hear someone go, I've been sober for a year or 2 years. And I'll just go, how the hell can you get one day?
Yeah.
It was like if someone had said a year and someone said 30 years, to me, they were both as unattainable as each other.
Yeah.
And like, I remember when I first read the big book, it said, if you think you got a drinking problem, just stop drinking for, and I was thinking a month, an hour, like what? And then it's like 1 year. You're like, what the hell? Like, are you a freaking psychopath? Like, the concept was just alien.
Just how?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I still, like, the people have come to me and gone, how do I stop drinking? And I kind of go, I don't know how I did it.
I don't either.
And like, I literally just say, look, you have to ask God.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I had to connect with God. I had to connect with a God that, which is funny. And our listeners know I've got a very religious background. I had to connect with God to help me to stop drinking, even though I'm meant to quote unquote know God. I'm meant to talk about God. I'm meant to be some kind of God expert in the society that I'm a part of. But I had to learn how to go to God with this.
Yeah. I think because we can have God in so many areas of our life, if we don't think we need God in a certain area, we don't invite God into that area.
Yeah, exactly.
I think for me, it was like, how do you even stop drinking for one day? Because as hard as I try, I cannot not drink. Like, I'm trying as hard as I can to get through a day without a drink, yet something in my mind tells me that it's okay. And then I regret it. Like, I'm stuck in this loop.
You justify it.
I'm stuck in this loop, man.
I can't tell you the amount of times I poured the alcohol down the sink and went, that's it, I'm done. And then like 4 hours later, I was getting more. I was going, oh no, it's okay because I've decided to stop drinking so I can have something. Like
That's the delusions, eh? Yeah, it's insane.
And so were you a daily drinker by that point?
It's funny because there were times in my story that I have been a daily drinker and a habitual drinker, you know, particularly when I lived in Wollongong at one point on my own. I was drinking daily then because I was on my own. By the end of my drinking, yes, you know, I started as a binge drinker and it was getting difficult to get alcohol-free days towards the end. I felt sick a lot of the day until I would drink.
Yep.
I would shake in the morning. I would shake until I had a drink. People don't know a lot of this stuff about me and they don't need to.
Yeah.
But that is my experience. Yeah. So I did have times like that where I felt ill until I had a drink and so on.
I was starting to shake as well towards the end. It wasn't too noticeable.
Yeah.
A couple of times I could see my hands and I thought, this is getting too much.
And I would think it was because of hangovers. And look, it probably was partly just that.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand that. I thought I'd just done damage the night before from too much drinking. But what I started to realise was then I would have a drink and it would go away.
Yeah.
So it was a form of a withdrawal.
It was having those physical effects on you.
Yes.
It was your body going, I need this, and not knowing how to cope without it, rather than just, I guess, that emotional or psychological addiction.
Yeah.
Tell me some of the high points you have in sobriety.
I think for me, the biggest thing I've gained from my sobriety is the improvement in my relationships with others. So my family, my friends, and myself. That's probably one of the best things about being sober and being in recovery as well, is that I change and therefore my relationships with others change in a good way.
Yeah. Can you point to something you have now that you could go, I definitely wouldn't have this if I was still drinking?
I actually like myself, and when I was drinking, I wasn't able to like myself. I have more clarity in my mind and in my decision making. I always often share that I have a lot less to the material in the material world. You know, when I was drinking, I had, you know, I own a house, I had a family, I had a great job, I was earning good money, but I had no real spirit or enthusiasm for those things or life. And now I have an enthusiasm for my life. I'm not a victim of my life anymore.
Yeah.
So that's what's different, I think, mostly, is that it's such an inside job. It's changed me from the inside out, being sober.
I love what you said at the start of that answer when you mentioned that you like yourself and you love yourself now. We were at a meeting a while ago and I heard somebody say that they have to force themselves. This person is, I guess, a habitual buster. And he said, I have to force myself to look in the mirror and say, I love you. He goes, I don't feel that anymore. And I remember when I was still drinking, I'd look in the mirror and I would just say, and I want to keep this PG, I'd say the most vilest things about myself. I'd say, like, I hate you, you're the worst, you're, you know, effing this and effing that and all these things. And I'd look at myself in the mirror and just go, like, you're a disgusting example of a human being and a man. And I love that you said that you love yourself now, because that's so important. Because if you can't love yourself, like, what point is there?
I think I'm learning to love myself through discovering that I'm not all those things you just said.
Yeah.
When I was drinking, I could only see about myself what was terrible. And I used to say things like, I'm hopeless. I used to tell myself that all the time. And that's something I don't say about myself anymore in terms of drinking and in terms of who I am and stuff.
You start saying that stuff, even if it's not true, you start believing it. And that's what's so important about, I think, the daily reflections and looking and going, you know, I'm going to, even if I do fall, I'm going to pick myself up and I'm going to do better. And you can actually see that working in your life.
There is so much I have gained in my sobriety. It would be impossible to tell you every single thing in this podcast. It's definitely a lot better. And I have to like my sober life. I have to make it something that I enjoy and that I love.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going to want to go back to drinking. So I have to work at it. I have to make it good.
Yeah. It's a disease that affects more than what people think about going, oh, if you just stop drinking, everything will be fine. Because that's what I did at the start. I just thought, I'll just stop drinking and I'll be okay. And I was for a while. But then I realized I'm left with all the reasons why I drank. And if I don't work on that, then I'm just miserable, sober in a situation I hate.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I've got to start working on me, because one of the most powerful things I found, and you've got it on your wall, the Serenity Prayer. And we say it at the end of every episode, but what I've realized is that about having the serenity to accept the things you can't change, the courage to change the things that you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The only thing I can change is me. I can't change you. You might be pissing me off. I can't change the person at work that always challenges me on every little tiny thing. I can't change that, but I can change how I react to that. And with that gives me serenity.
Interesting, isn't it?
It's funny how that turns around, isn't it?
It is. And that prayer is so timeless. You know, it can apply to so many things on a daily basis and so many situations. I think like with spirituality, I'm no expert, but
I don't think anyone can be.
The deeper you go, it just seems to reveal more and more and more and more as time goes on.
Yeah.
The simple things like the Serenity Prayer can take on a deeper meaning. The more you apply it to your life, I have found. I have made some really good friendships in AA. When I tried to get sober pre-AA, there was just no one I knew that was sober. There was just no one that had stopped drinking because they had a drinking problem. People may not have drank, but there was no one like me, I felt, in the world. And coming to AA, I met people who were like me. And that has made all the difference in my world. Just having people who are like me in the world. And I've made some really beautiful friendship, you know, in AA. So
it's that shared experience, because there's a lot of people that can empathize and they can do a good job, but they can't really put themselves where you are, because as much as they try, unless you've gone through this, you don't understand it.
And everyone has their thing in their life, whether it be, you know, and some people have more than one thing, you know, for some people it might be the death of a loved one that's, you know, catapults them into some kind of spiritual experience, or, you know, insert other life challenge. And there's plenty of them. But I think when it comes to, and it is good to actually find people, like-minded people, so that you know you're not walking in the world alone with this issue.
Has there ever been a point after you stopped drinking that you kind of had an awakening moment where you're just like, so there's something small that's happened and you've gone, I wouldn't be able to enjoy this if it wasn't for my decision to stop drinking?
I think for me, turning most things into a gratitude moment, and it sounds really corny because it's not like I sit around and, you know, thank God for every single little thing. Although sometimes I do, because there are lots of things I wouldn't be able to enjoy when I was drinking. For example, going places without alcohol.
Yeah, sounds so simple, doesn't it?
It really does. Like, you want me to come out on the weekend
and not drink? Are you psycho?
Yeah, and like bring my kids and go to the park and actually try and enjoy that. Or I just couldn't. I just had no interest in it. And I love that I can now enjoy the simple things. I can give my time to other people. It's not all about Shae. You know, if someone wants 2 hours of my time, I'm able to dedicate that time to be about them.
Yeah.
And I'm not perfect at it, but I actually have the ability to try and enjoy simple things that I could never enjoy while I was drinking.
Yeah. For me, it's little things like children, like my kids, the little things like going, I'm not falling asleep on the couch like 2.5 minutes into the Saturday, Friday night movie.
Yeah.
You know, Dad's not doing stupid things anymore. He's not getting angry at little things anymore. Not that I was overly angry, I think, at least. But I think it's the appreciation of the stuff that all just used to be
background noise.
Yeah, obstacles. It's like it's like when you're looking through binoculars and everything's blurry and you just go, what's the point of this? I don't want to be looking through this. And then someone suddenly turns it into focus and you go, I was missing out on an entire world and now I'm not. I can enjoy it. I can engage. I can be a productive member of society.
Yeah. And you don't realize how good that is until you realize that you weren't doing it before.
Do you feel like you have a greater appreciation for things now that you've gone through this? And if you could rewind and go, I'd choose never to drink, and then I guess fast forward to where you are now, like if you could compare yourself and go, look, if I'd never drank as opposed to me drinking and overcoming it, do you think that now you have a greater appreciation?
I do. I think that's the process of recovery and that sort of spiritual journey, though. I think that can come, you know, as I said, through any life experience that people go through. For me, it was drinking.
Yeah.
I think that's a recovery-based journey, not necessarily the drinking and not drinking, but I definitely couldn't have had any kind of recovery or any kind of spiritual journey, connection, whatever you want to call it, if I was drinking, because alcohol was the higher power for me.
Yeah, it's kind of like the person that really appreciates being free because they've been locked up for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
As opposed to someone who's never been locked up and takes that for granted.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Everything can be appreciated if we choose to appreciate it.
Absolutely. So what advice would you have for anybody who's caught in a similar situation to you and me and anybody who is over drinking?
That's a really good question. As far as I'm concerned, until you're ready to hear it, you're not ready. You're not going to do anything about it.
Yep.
But if people are concerned about their drinking, I would suggest coming to a meeting of AA. I can't convince anyone to get sober. No one could convince me to get sober.
Yeah.
I lost my marriage over it. You know, my husband and kids couldn't get me sober. I can't even keep myself sober now. AA keeps me sober. I would probably say to them, you're not overreacting, because that's what I used to believe a lot of the time when other people would justify my drinking and I would justify my drinking. I'd probably reassure them, you're not overreacting. It's okay to question it.
Yeah.
And to think that maybe you are drinking too much. But yeah, I guess as a sober person, my job is just to share my experience. And for me, my sobriety really started when I went to AA and got into the steps. So I would just suggest that it all starts at AA, sobriety and recovery. It's where they need to start.
Excellent. Well, look, Shae, thank you so much for your time today. I've got to admit, I didn't follow my normal format when it comes to the questions because I just think the conversation flowed so beautifully.
Yeah, good.
And I think that's got a lot to do with you and how open you are. But look, if you could, why don't you lead us out with a serenity prayer?
Sure. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us today on Beyond Sobriety. Just before we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a gentle reminder. If you happen to recognise anyone who shared their story on this podcast, I urge you to respect their anonymity and privacy. Let's create a safe space where individuals can feel empowered to share their experience without fear of judgment or disclosure. And if you found today's episode helpful or inspiring, I encourage you to share Beyond Sobriety with somebody who might benefit from it. Together we can spread awareness, support and hope to those still struggling with alcohol addiction. Remember, your feedback is invaluable to us. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, or stories you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at beyondsobrietyaa@gmail.com. Thank you once again for tuning in. Until next time, stay strong, stay sober, and remember, you're not alone in this journey. I'm Michael, and I'm an alcoholic.